Is the Samsung Galaxy S22 series of phones going to be a huge disappointment? I mean, for me, no, it's not going to be a disappointment. I think they're just another series of smartphones from Samsung, and they'll be pretty cool. I'm sure you'll hold it and you'll think it's really awesome. But right now it appears that some of Samsung's greatest fans are already disappointed, and it hasn't even been announced. And this is a problem because if your hardcore fans aren't going to buy this thing, then you've got a very high hill to climb for the rest of 2022. Because no matter what, the Samsung Galaxy S series of phones are almost never the top 5 or 6 best-selling phones in the world by the end of the year. I mean, a lot of times they're not even in the top 10. Most of those phones get sold to a lot of the hardcore people, and then what Samsung tends to sell the most of are the budget lines of phones, and sometimes those phones will find their way in the top 10. But the S series just doesn't. And a lot of it is word of mouth and promotions, trade-ins, and that sort of thing, but they're never gonna sell so many that it's gonna be one of the top 5 smartphones in the world. So if you're already upsetting a lot of the people who are gonna buy it, what are you left with? And to be honest, again, I'm not sure why people are so upset, but I guess we should probably dig in and see, will the Samsung Galaxy S22 series of phones be a big disappointment? Or are you all wrong? Well, I'll tell you all about it right after this.
This is, you listening to Travis.
What up, players? Welcome back. And for all you new people, welcome. My name's Travis and I do tech videos every single week and have a blast doing them. And today we're going to talk about the Samsung Galaxy S22 series of phones, if it's actually a disappointment, and who's at fault. So let's get into the video. So if you're not aware, the Samsung Galaxy S22 series of phones are right around the corner to the S22, the S22 Ultra, and it's essentially going to be the Galaxy Note in a lot of ways. Let's talk about that real quick. Basically, a couple of years ago, Samsung sold the very last Samsung Galaxy Note, and RIP, as that was my favorite series of phones, really of all time, as I was a hardcore Samsung Galaxy Note user from the Samsung Galaxy Note 2 all the way up to the 9. I wasn't real happy about the Note going away, but I totally get it. They were one of the only brands that was out there selling a flagship at the beginning of the year and then another one at the end. But it was something that kept excitement about Samsung going throughout the entire year. As a matter of fact, you may have noticed, because last year they did not have a flagship at the tail end of the year, you almost forgot about them. Like at the tail end of the year, other than the Samsung S22 series of rumors, they kind of disappeared after the S21 and the S21 Ultra, and then it was Apple season, and then that was the end of Samsung. Typically what happens is they at least have another boost of excitement around the Note series phones. They don't have that anymore, but I think it's probably because they didn't probably sell enough of those to have 2 flagships, so they merged it into one. From a marketing perspective, that makes sense. But it should make the Samsung Galaxy S22 the best type of phone they've ever made. But I noticed something in my comment section that pretty much says that you guys and gals, or at least a lot of you, are not excited. And it's actually Samsung's fault, because this goes back to how they've marketed these phones in the past. They've always been spec flexing, talking about some of the best specs in the industry and why you should care. And if they ever stop spec flexing or stop putting in the top level specs, you're gonna get upset, and rightfully so, because they've trained you to care about that stuff. I mean, think about it like this. Of course, they were dunking on Apple as soon as Apple removed the headphone jack and had headphone jacks on all their phones for a couple of years until they didn't. And they did a 360 dunk on Apple when Apple stopped putting in power supply bricks in with their phones, but not even a year later, they were doing it. So they're kind of like doing things that make sense for the business, but upsetting the people that really support them the most, you guys and gals. So from the spec side of things, it looks like things might be going backwards. Now, one of the things they've been investing in is their own processor with Exynos, and basically combining them with AMD into hopefully this new super processor to kind of compete with the A series of processors from Apple. Because again, it's a spec flex. You got to tell people you got the fastest processor in the world, because that's why you want people to buy your phone. And it looks like this year it might not happen. Apparently something's going on. If you've been paying attention to the leaks and rumors, it appears that it's not actually going to happen for this series of phone. It was supposed to happen this year for the S22, but something's going on. Like they're taking down videos from their own YouTube channel about the thing that they just announced recently. It's so weird. So we may or may not see that processor in the S22 series of phones at all. I don't know. They might go back to Qualcomm, which for a lot of people in my comment section, is a good thing. Like, you are looking forward to a Qualcomm processor in your Samsung S series of phone. But let's take a look at just a couple of the comments I've seen on a recent video from Samsung fans that just aren't happy anymore. Samsung series of bread and butter Galaxy models is actually diminished in specs, features, and accessories in the box, and overall value and flagship qualities in the last few years. If you had bought an older Galaxy that were the pinnacle flagship device with all the features and accessories, these recent and current Galaxies are, despite 1 or 2 yearly improvements, the worst Galaxies ever made. Whoa. Now, this is from a Samsung Galaxy fan. This isn't from anyone else, but he kind of makes a point. And here's what he's talking about specifically. The removal of the iris scanner, the heart rate scanner, the LED light, SD card option, 3.5mm headphone jack, and many, many more. No, I'm just joking. But yes, he makes a good point. If you are having these be your differentiation of your phone versus everyone else, and you start removing them, then you're just like everybody else. So I'm going to add in one more thing. DeX, which it looks like is not showing up on a lot of their phones nowadays, which is ridiculous. And Samsung Pay's MST, which was the best mobile pay option, period. So they had 2 things that were absolutely incredible, and they removed those as well. And those, by the way, are like software things. MST is a little bit more hardware, but DeX is just software. And it was something that differentiated it on a level that that Apple wasn't even trying to compete with. BG says, great point. Samsung phones used to represent what was possible in the world of smartphone tech. They used to push the envelope, and now they've turned into an Android version of Apple. Well, if they had turned into an Android version of Apple, they'd be selling more phones. Oh, that was unnecessary. Sorry about that. And there's also the rumor of price increases on this year's S22 series of phones. Now, sometimes these leaks about prices are wrong, so I take this with a grain of salt. You just never know. But if that is the case, and the specs have been lowered, I mean, in one case, I think someone was saying that the base level of the S22 series might have only 8 gigs of RAM versus 12 or whatever, then I know you're going to be upset about that, to pay more for less. But let's talk about that. Samsung has got you used to seeing these big numbers that don't even necessarily make a difference. As a matter of fact, look at how they market their cameras on the S21 series of phones currently, versus how Apple is marketing their cameras on their iPhone 13 series. It's kind of weird. You notice here that the only thing that Samsung's talking about is the megapixels. And what Apple is talking about is like what the camera can do. And that's kind of a big deal, because a lot of times Samsung will use these big numbers that don't necessarily mean anything. If you remember the 100x zoom, that sounds impressive until you actually try to use it and realize that if you zoom in 100 times into something, it looks like trash. So their marketing has got to improve, and they've got to figure out what's actually important to people and get people off the specs, because as they decide to make cuts here and there, and the things that they usually market as industry leaders on that they're no longer doing, they now become, I don't know, a phone that no one really wants, or at least not your hardcore fans. And again, their S series of phones don't even sell in the top 5 or 6 in the world at all. So it's not like they're the #1 phone and they're just now figuring this out. They're not. They just aren't. So maybe they should be more interested in what these phones can do for other people. Now, in some of the presentations, they do a great job of this, but they still are pushing people to these specs that at some point are going to start to fall over. It's like, what do I care about how many megapixels my phone's camera is if it takes crappy pictures? Now, what I mean by that is there have been cameras on other phones with high megapixels that don't take good pictures. It has nothing to do with how many megapixels your camera has. It's all the other features and the software that you're putting on top of it. So lean more into that. I think at the end of the day, we're going to have to see what comes out of the actual announcements. While we may know what the S22 series looks like, we don't know how it's going to perform or what the software is going to do. And that at the end might make a difference. But you tell me, what are you looking forward to in the S22 series? Or have you just been let down one too many times by Samsung? I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below, and we'll see you next time. Peace and love.